Wizards of the Coast, Card Hoarder, and Scott Monroe. You guys have been doing us a huge service, and we're definitely happy to be here playing some Legacy. So yeah, with that, I'll finally try to turn it over to Daniel and hear what he thinks of the matchup.
So yeah, I've played it a few times, and I always feel comfortable from the Grixis control side, but I saw Jarvis' list didn't have any blue blasts in it. So he did have a Needle, and he has Drown in the Lock, which is a new card, because specifically enchantments like Sneak Attack can be difficult for Grixis control to deal with, and Blue Blast can be such a powerful answer to it. But so I didn't see any, but there was a Needle in the sideboard, and there's Drown in the Lock. I haven't seen this card in Legacy yet. It's pretty new, so it might also give you another way to interact with those expensive enchantments. And I think one of the main things is Snapcaster Mage is just so effective to flashback the counter spells, and I didn't see Phil have any Boseijus or anything, so it'll be a close matchup, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. In terms of what Twitter saw, I'm trying to pull that up. Looks like Twitter has Jarvis as a 65% favorite over Phil. So we'll see if that turns out to be the case. I know Jarvis said right before the match he didn't feel, amazingly confident, but he's ready to go. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's definitely a very close matchup.
Yeah, let's take a look at the deck list too. I know you already talked a little bit about the Grixis control deck, so we definitely want the blast. We definitely want the needles. Those are going to be good. I guess we're talking about game one first. I mean, game one. Do you think that Grixis control has a good shot?
Well, when you know what the deck list is and there's Landon Mulligan, you definitely have a shot, but it definitely gets much better post board. But at Jarvis's sideboard, not to go too far off topic, it's actually not very good for the matchup. He doesn't have any Flusterstorms. His sideboard doesn't seem like he was anticipating a sneak and show. But game one, it's definitely hard to know because you need to play a lot to know. But I definitely think with the Landon Mulligan, like Daddy knows to bottom these removal spells, it's not actually going to be that bad. Like you see these removal spells, but he knows that he can bottom it, and he knows what he's looking for, which is Jace the Mind Sculptor and Interactionist. And you have Brainstorm to try and dig for that, yeah.
Yeah, him to Tarok is also a beating, so with Renin 6 pushed out, him is back in, so we'll see if that ends up being a key factor.
Yeah. Like I actually think... Oh, sorry. I was going to just say, if Jarvis didn't know what he was playing against, I think his win rate would be significantly lower. Like the fact that you know what to mulligan for, I think boosts it by like maybe 5 to 20% probably.
I like that. Shrewd numerical analysis. Let's take a look at the sneak and show list.
Yeah, this is interesting. He has the 2 Simian Spirit Guides, probably anticipating maybe Delve for Daze decks. But I don't see a lot of grindy elements in it. I don't see any Boseijus. And in the sideboard, there's not too many. There's some Blood Moons. I don't know how effective they will be, but nothing too spicy. The main thing that pops out to me is just the lack of Boseiju. And
yeah, so there's no Boseiju. The other key card I think is Daze. I'm trying to think of if Daze or Spell Pierce is better in this matchup. I think Daze, you kind of want it against kind of a lot of the non-blue decks, as well as against Delver. So I think this is a matchup where Pierce might be a little bit better. But that being said, like Sneak and Show is a very proactive deck. I think the London Mulligan definitely help the deck a good amount. You just get a lot more turn 2 Jam Show and Tell with Force backup, and a lot of the times the blue player is not going to have an answer. But we'll see what happens. Looks like the players are ready, so let's get to it.
Yeah, Spell Pierce is particularly good against him. Okay.
So it looks like Jarvis is on the play on the top screen, and he has a hand with Jace and some counter spells, so seems fine to me.
Yeah, Snap Keep. Well, that looks like a great hand. You wish you have him or stuff to do early. I mean, it's not the best. You can definitely lose with it, but you don't have any of your dead removal spells.
Yeah, and how you win this matchup is you stop the first thing and land a Planeswalker, and then that runs away with the game. Yeah. So Phil has Show and Tell Grizzlebrand. He's going to be he has Daze for protection, but as I mentioned earlier, it's not really that good in terms of this matchup in countering their counter spells. So Phil's going to be basically looking for more backup Show and Tell, sneak attacks, and Force of Wills as well. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Jarvis didn't play. He has Hymns in his list, right? He didn't play one of the black lands on, or one of the fetch lands on turn 1. So if he drew a hymn, he couldn't cast it. Just kind of interesting. But yeah, Daze definitely. I haven't played a lot of Show and Tell, so it definitely feels like a Spell Pierce or Flusterstorm would be much better in matchup than Daze. It seems like his deck isn't particularly built for Grixis control, but that's not like a matchup I usually think about. It's not as scary for the deck. versus something like Delver, where the days and the spirit guides could be much better.
Yeah, so it looks like Phil was able to find 2 Force of Wills, and it looks like Phil's going to keep those. So I think we're going to be seeing probably a turn 3 counter war.
Yeah, I mean, you just 2 Force of Wills, so some players might think, well, that 2-for-1's yourself, but this deck, all you do is you play Show and Tell, and Jarvis he's going to need so many counter spells. So
Well,
definitely would keep it. It's all you're
if
looking
Force
for.
of Wills, like a 2-for-1, what is Grizzlebrand? Is that a 14-for-1?
Yeah. But I mean, like, that's why you're so happy to see it. And Jarvis hasn't found anything super useful yet. The Bolt's like a pretty bad draw. The Jace is just a generic blue card.
So Phil had the option to brainstorm end step, but he figured he actually just needs to have, 2 extra blue cards to pitch. So he's like, you know what, this is fine.
Yeah, if you draw lands,
And he also gets to keep the days if somehow that becomes relevant, which it could be against Force of Negation. So,
yeah, for sure.
so we're seeing a counter war here, and actually, it looks like this days is potentially going to be live, but I guess Jarvis can just play around it by.
Yeah, he knows he has 4 days, so I would assume he plays Drown in the Lock here.
Yeah, so Drown on the Lock is good, and then, oh wow, okay. So this is like both players. When you have the London Mulligan and you know the matchup, you know exactly which cards you need, and this is
It's actually
like
pretty interesting.
Jarvis is just gonna squeak out of it. He's gonna lose his Jace, but he's not gonna be facing a Grizzlebrand. So like he basically had like every single card he needed to avoid losing, and we get to watch more Magic. So it looks like Drown on the Lock. If it were any other card, this game would kind of be over. But
Yeah,
looks like we're gonna keep going.
is an excellent draw, and Baleful Strix is an excellent draw here in Snapcaster. Those are 2 excellent draws. They're just like your quote unquote free creatures. I was also going to say it's kind of interesting. Phil didn't exile the days. He would rather keep it in Brainstorm, but it makes sense because if Jarvis has another Force of Will, it's so bad for him, and like trying to mise a Brainstorm is like makes a lot of sense because you really want the Show and Tell to resolve. Jarvis has like a Brainstorm.
Well, I think no, but I think Phil did have a decision where he could have pitched the days or the brainstorm, and he chose to pitch brainstorm. Um,
And then it's a
so
pretty close choice, I think. It is a pretty
okay,
close.
so this was basically the last turn to draw like a show and tell or a sneak attack, and he did because Jarvis just drew the Snapcaster this turn, so he wasn't able to hold on Snapcaster Mage Drown in the Lock.
Yeah.
So it looks like Phil's gonna have a Grizzlebrand at 16 life, and that should be enough to assemble a win. But we'll
So it's
see.
also worth noting the days can counter adjacent Mind Sculptor, which he might have, which so it's not like it does nothing if it doesn't work that turn. Jarvis was low on lands and
That's
doesn't have a lot
fair.
of ways to clock outside of Jace. But yeah, it definitely was kind of a tough decision. I find playing the Show and Tell deck can actually be really difficult just because what you care about is so different from normal Magic that you just need to like relearn everything.
Hmm. So interesting. Phil choosing not to draw there. The other key card to be aware of is Lightning Bolt, and he just needs to make sure he doesn't pay 14 and then just lose to that.
Yeah, he just
So
might not like discarding to hand size also.
I think
Like,
he's definitely going to start with 1 right here and seeing the cards he draws. If he's able to put another monster into play, that'll help inform him. Oh, and there you go. He has assembled Sneak Attack Emrakul. So
yeah, that's pretty good. It's definitely he didn't just win the game when you draw 7 because you can definitely whiff with this deck. Even though when your opponent draws 7, it feels impossible. I've definitely played Grizzlebrand, drawn like 21 cards and lost. So
yeah, but it's interesting. I mean, the game's not over this turn because Jarvis gets a Snapcaster Mage and counter the Sneak Attack.
yeah, this is where
But
Leovold
he has 2 backup Sneak Attacks, so I think Phil just lets this happen probably, and then like there's no reason to lose the Lightning Bolt here. So hopefully Phil sees that and just
and Phil's
passes
already.
the turn. And well, he could brainstorm here is the play he could consider making. But so I don't hate that. Otherwise you can just wait another turn.
I was gonna say Phil already used 2 Force of Wills. He won't be able to look at that many cards. And so if Jarvis actually isn't that bad, that bad of a spot, because if he draws like a Jace the Mind Sculptor to remove the Grizzlebrand, there's a pretty good chance Phil won't be able to find it. I don't know. I have to see Jarvis' list to see if it needs Spell Pierce, because maybe Phil could have cast like a Preordain first, to try and like dig for a Force of Will.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying looking at Jarvis's list. No, he doesn't have any soft counter magic, so he could have maybe like cast the Preordain first
Right.
to try and dig for but he was maybe he's just like, I'm drawing 7, like you're just like jamming, like you're like, whatever, I don't want to slow roll, shout out to Arc 4N. So yeah, but yeah, like you could definitely lose if to a Jace, because you already used 2 Force of Wills, and if you can't find another, it's really hard to draw 7. Like actually, you're just dead if you draw 7. So
Right.
you'd have to find a Jace like basically now. I mean, you do have sneak attack. It's not that bad actually, because you you take 5 and then you untap and you play sneak attack and you win. But
Looks like the Ponder's looking at a Ponder and 2 more Grizzlebrand, so I think you're fine shuffling that. And then next turn you can go Brainstorm into look for a Force of Will, and if you don't find it, jam a second sneak attack. And if that doesn't work, you have the 3rd sneak attack. So
yeah, I don't think Jarvis can win unless he just counters every single sneak attack.
okay, well that's a Force of Will. So this game
Yeah,
will
but he has
continue.
Jays.
I think you can attack with 1 Baleful Strix.
Yeah,
But
maybe, yeah. No, but yeah, Phil has Jace, so that's just game there. And I was gonna say, actually, it's not that scary if he draws Jace, because you don't need to draw 7. You can just let it get bounced, and then you just play sneak attack and win. And yeah, Jarvis' draw was actually pretty decent here. He didn't have him, which is critical. He didn't have a discard spell, like nothing to do early. And yeah, and he did put Phil in the squeeze. Like Phil had to draw a show and tell. As you said, if Phil
yeah,
did
that
draw,
last turn basically.
yeah, maybe like one or two more, but yeah.
Well, the next turn he would have had like Snapcaster Mage, Drown Unlock, so he would have needed to like start fighting through all these counter spells that Jarvis was drawing. So I think that was more or less the last turn.
Days, the ultimate non-bow with City of Traders.
Okay, so now I think you swing with
Yeah, I
both.
can't imagine a comeback looking at Jarvis's list here. I mean, because you keep maybe if you trade with Grizzlebrand and then like Phil, like the bot, like literally never draws. Oh no,
I think
because I think because doesn't Grizzlebrand Emmerich will get sacrificed end of turn, so you could trade
yeah,
with
I think you
Grizzlebrand.
had to trade with Grizzlebrand probably.
Yeah, though it's fair to Jarvis probably just gave up and you know.
Yeah, I mean, like he was like very very low percentage to win, even if you traded with the Grizzlebrand. So
Yeah, definitely under 1%, because you basically have to win by Phil never drawing another creature before Jarvis. Well, Jarvis would need to like draw Jace and start fate sealing, and then Phil
well,
would like
you have a bunch of lands too that you need to draw.
yeah. But I mean,
So,
like if Phil can draw a creature for like 8 or 10 turns, I mean we've seen it happen before, like that match Brad Nelson versus BBD, if you remember it.
I don't know if
SCG.
any. So the funny thing is, both decks play Blood Moon. It might make a little bit of sense for the Sneak Intro deck to bring in like 1 Blood Moon on the play to make him to Torak awkward, but I don't know if Phil's going to do that. We'll see. Looks like he's choosing to bring in his own counter spells, whereas Jarvis is bringing in his counter spells in the Pithing Needle.
Yeah, it's definitely, well, Blood Moon, when you're playing your Grixis deck, it's more of like a Haymate, like just because you have it doesn't mean you can play around it perfectly. Like you just have it because it can be a haymaker against some certain decks, and you don't need that many basics, because when you play against certain decks where Blood Moon is good, then that sort of implies you don't need to have perfect, mana configuration, so you can kind of hurt yourself in the process. But it's definitely not that strong coming from his side, but it can definitely be a decent option. Depends how
Yeah.
bad. Cards
Looks like neither player is bringing it in. Jarvis is choosing to keep in some Guns commands, which can buy back Snapcaster Mages.
Yeah, and
So
also like discard mode is like discard a card can be relevant like a lot of the time, and buying back Snapcasters can be pretty relevant too. But yeah, if I was Phil, I'd be tempted to cut like Singing Spirit Guides and Petals maybe. I mean, I'm not a sneak and show expert, but
yeah, it looks like that's what he's doing. He's cutting 2 Spirit Guides and 2 Preordains and bringing in the counter magic. So you're just trying to win the game on the stack
yeah.
at an
Personally,
earlier
I
turn.
might be tempted to leave in Preordains over Lotus Petals, but that's just because I like drawing cards. So I don't know if it's right or not. I'm definitely not a sneak and show player, but I feel like you have time and you just need to like keep jamming threats. But Lotus Petal gives you speed. I mean, here you can see it can be strong, but yeah. Ooh,
Looks like
Jarvis
Phil
hand
needs
looks
to
nice.
mulligan here. I mean, he has mana, but he doesn't have a second blue card. So,
Yeah,
yeah, he
that's where you can
agrees
see
with me. He takes
preordained
the
just
mulligan.
preordained could just help you like safely, keep hands and stuff. But I don't know it's gonna be right on average. But Jarvis hand looks like super nice,
Yep. Turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 him. Hopefully
and
turn
then you
4
even have the
Jace.
Jace. Yeah,
Yeah.
because the problem with Jarvis deck is it doesn't close the game very quickly, so your discard might not do much, but you just have the Jace to close the game
hmm
there.
So one like slightly interesting thing is because Jarvis plays Drown in the Lock, you're actually incentivized like not to fetch before you have to combo off. And we saw that the Drown in the Lock was live last game. If that card wasn't live, then Phil, would have won earlier.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Take show and tell, fair enough. I didn't actually see if Jarvis sided in. Actually, he's not playing surgical. I guess he just has Grafdigger's cages. Yeah.
hmm
I was gonna say that's a card you can sometimes bring in. It's obviously much better against the intuition versions where it's just very good, but here it's decent. Brainstorm always a good draw. There's definitely you could make some arguments to casting it here, so you can use the fetch land while you know so you don't get locked out. But you want to draw more cards so that you know what your hand wants, and it's just casting him on curve is nice, uses your mana nicely, and yeah.
Yep. Next turn he can like, brainstorm into another him or Baleful Strix or something.
Yeah.
So now Phil gets to cast Brainstorm in response, given that his hand doesn't really do that much. I mean, you could be greedy and let it resolve and hope to heat the Brainstorm. So that is kind of what happened.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the complex tensions in Magic with cantrips actually is you want to hold them as long as possible so that you have more information when you use them. But also, if you don't cast them, it's like a big tempo loss,
mhm.
basically, which makes it pretty complicated because it's like, it's basically, am I gonna lose the early game or the late game? Because if you don't cast it early, you can lose the early game by falling behind on tempo. But if you cast it too early, you can lose the late game by not getting the maximum value out of knowing what you need to find. And
So
it's actually pretty
Jarvis,
hard to balance.
he was basically deciding if he wanted to play the Volk in case he brainstormed into a him. But I like not playing the Volk because you're just way more likely to draw like a fetch land and then be able to cast Gurmag Angler here.
Yeah, and if Phil Bell pierces, well, actually, sorry, maybe his list doesn't have spell pierce. I have to look at it
Yes,
again. Then it's not hitting your
Flusterstorm
Jace. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so it
and
would
Red
just be
Blast.
Fluster. Okay, but yeah, Red Blast. So it would just be like mostly Flusterstorm. Okay. Yeah, yeah, two Flusterstorm.
And I think Jarvis knows about every card other than the sneak attack. So he knows it's like a relatively safe turn to go and deploy a threat.
Though, also one thing when you're playing around cards, you also have to consider: is it just going to get me anyway? So like you could say he could play around Flusterstorm, but in Jarvis's head, he might be like Flusterstorm's always going to be good this game. So sometimes you just have to play into a card, and you can't really navigate around it.
So this is pretty awkward for Phil. Like he found combo pieces, but he doesn't really have the mana. So I think one thing he could consider. Oh, actually, he does have the mana. Um, his 4 mana, but he needs to shuffle away the Pyroblast. So
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
also
I
it
think
always feels. Sorry, I was just gonna say it always feels bad to brainstorm and then keep one of the cards. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Because when you play brainstorm, it feels like you always. But I guess here he actually, yeah, he has the 4 mana for sneak attack,
Yeah.
and it's
So
not
this is
just
actually
enough.
a great setup for Phil. He's able to jam the sneak attack this turn when Jarvis's shields are down, and then if he untaps with a Grizzlebrand in hand, that should put him firmly in the driver's seat, probably like 90% to win.
And yeah, it's probably frustrating if you're from Jarvis' perspective. Yeah, turn one Thoughtseize, turn two him, then you take turn three off, and your opponent has sneak attack in play. Like Jarvis
Yeah, I
draws
mean
pretty good.
that is definitely part of the power of the Sneak and Show deck. So now Jarvis is basically cantripping in order to find a discard spell.
Yeah, they ain't gonna be easy. And this is where Blue Blast, like a lot of Grixis control has played two Blue Blasts, especially particularly for the sneak and show matchup because they're so weak against it. But with a small field, you might have felt it wasn't
Yeah,
probably going to
Pithing
be good.
Needle would be really good too. Looks like he's looking at a Brainstorm.
I guess also Phil isn't particularly known for playing red decks, so
and a Badlands. I'm not sure what the third
Yeah.
card was.
It's just the
Oh, it's just 2
preordain, right? So
cards.
it's
It's
just
just
2.
Preordain. That's too bad. I wish it was Cry 3.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
whoa, he hit the Thoughtseize. Okay, so now I think next turn he can go Jace Fate Seal. So I think this is a close game again.
yeah. I think I put like Jace on top so that you can pitch Snapcaster. Yeah, in
Yep,
case
you
Phil
would
plays a
snap
Thunder.
Force of Negation like any cantrip.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Slam it, and then Jarvis actually in a pretty decent spot now. There it is, the days. But actually, it might be pretty good here. Well, not pretty good, but it's going to do something if Jarvis slams the Jays, which it's very hard to imagine him not doing, considering there's a sneak attack in play.
The problem
So-
is that Jarvis already has a Gurmag Angler, so even though he gets to counter the Jace, Jarvis still has another way to win the game.
Yeah, but countering the Jays can actually help just because the Fate Seal is so strong here. So it might like if the J if Phil like drew a land, he would be in a much worse position, just because of the Fate Seal. But of course, he's going to die in like 2 turns to this, Angler, and he can't even draw his Grizzlebrand soon. I mean, he can attack. He can draw after he attacks due to the lifelink. Oh wow, he's actually going for Snapcaster. Yeah, that's pretty surprising. I'm not sure exactly what his reasoning here is because you're pretty like your opponent has sneak. Maybe he's trying to make a faster lethal with 7 power, or maybe he's hedging against Emrakul. No, but he has 11 life. Because the thing is, you're so far behind to sneak attack. Or does he know he has a bolt on top? I don't think so. Because
No,
you're so
well, he did Brainstorm.
yeah, because you're so far behind to sneak attack that you just want to stop. Like if they had anything good in hand, they could just use it, right? And the game's only going to be like 1 or 2 more turns, so that was a pretty weird choice. Maybe he thought about he remembered the Pyroblast from earlier, probably, like on turn 1, turn 2. But I guess Phil went Hellbent, but maybe Jarvis thought about the Pyroblast still.
That makes sense. All right, so it looks like he kept the card on top, so it's not a creature. Phil could have played the fetch land to, get another draw out of it. But
yeah, and even worth noting that playing the Snapcaster, he no longer has days. But maybe Phil is still the winner because he was the one who dealt the lethal damage that game. Or the answer to it.
Jarvis did side out all of his bolts too, for what it's worth. He did have Gulligan's Command.
Yeah, he
Okay.
he must have probably just remembered the Pyroblast from earlier.
So I think Jarvis definitely was ahead on the play. Now that Phil's on the play, I think it becomes super close. Really, I feel like it'll be a toss up. Although Jarvis was kind of put into a corner where he had to draw the Thoughtseize, and he did. So
Yeah, but
well, he could
Phil
have
had a
also
really good start too. Like Phil had to play the sneak attacks through all the disruption. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. Oh yeah, here we can see will Phil sideboard the Blood Moon in on the play. He has the Lotus Petals, even he has the Jaces, and we saw that game. It could have been reasonably effective against Jarvis. So I mean, if he wants the Lotus Petals, Blood Moon's one of the explosive things. The problem is what he cut, and it's also because Lotus Petal is one of your worst cards, so it is kind of the card that you would cut for the Blood Moon, and it's good with the Blood Moon, which is awkward.
Yeah, that is awkward. Looks like I think both players are not going to do too many changes. Jarvis was considering bolts, and he's like, "Eh." I would even consider like Tyrant Scorn, but I think it's like pretty marginal.
He was probably thinking about Arcane Artisan.
Oh yeah.
That's probably what he's thinking about. Yeah.
So Phil has a creature and counter spells and lands, which is where you want to be, but he does not have the action piece.
Yeah, there you can see. I mean, I don't want to sound like ragging, but there you can see the Lotus Petal. It's awkward again over the Preordain, but again, I don't know on average how the matchup goes, and I'm the kind of person who's always likes to play Preordain if I can. But
Looks
you
like
can definitely
Jarvis
see.
rolled to 6. His 7 just didn't really have any real interaction, but his 6 gets the curve of Thoughtseize into him again.
Yeah, and it has Snapcaster, and this is just super good. And I mean,
Yeah, in terms of
plus him.
Phil's hand, would I keep it? It
Well,
always feels
maybe
bad
pull up the
mulliganing
Wonders
against the
deck.
Thoughtseize deck, but this hand also like.
Well, some of the cards you could argue are close to mulligans. Like, how much are the extra mana sources going to do? How much are the stuff like that? Like you
Yeah,
don't.
I think I
That's not.
would. I think I would mulligan, and it looks like. Oh, did Phil already mulligan to 6, or did he?
Oh, I didn't catch that. Yeah.
Okay, if
Well,
if
he did
Phil
have.
already if Phil already mulliganed to 6, then yeah, I would keep that.
Yeah, he's probably just.
I would not
thinking.
want to go to 5.
Yeah. But yeah.
Oh, is
We'll see
Jarvis
how
on
it goes.
5? Okay, looks like we missed a couple mulligans. Um,
Looks like
so I think this makes the game a little bit.
Jarvis is on 6. Yeah.
Oh, he's on 6. He's on 6. Okay.
No big deal. 5 is definitely a lot lower, but he's also on the draw. He gets that back. And being on the draw can almost be advantageous in the games where nobody gets a threat early to snowball. Because being on the play, you get like your land drop advantage, so you can cast your spells first. But when both players' hands are pretty bad, you're not really taking advantage of being on the play, and then you just kind of fall behind on a card. Like he already lost the land drop advantage, just like literally right now. So
Yeah, but you did get the ability to daze a turn 1 Thoughtseize, which you wouldn't be able to do on the draw. So
yeah, but then you're also, I mean, just in the sense of the disadvantage of being on the play versus draw, like Jarvis having now the extra card again. So good thing for Phil is his hand's pretty bad, so to him can't be.
Well, I think you have to force the him because you want to keep your one relevant card, which is Grizzlebrand. So I think we're gonna see a Force of Will, and then we'll see if Phil can rip something.
Yeah, because Ancient Tomb's also pretty good. It's 2 mana sources in 1 land, so definitely I think you want to, because Grizzlebrand and Ancient Tomb are pretty good in your hand right now. But then Jarvis, he's not gonna stop. He's gonna bring a Snapcaster back next turn. He drew a Jace, which is a good draw step. I didn't see what he actually bottomed, but it seems like whatever he bottomed, he got it back because he has a Brainstorm again in the 3rd land.
Flusterstorm. Okay, so that counters the him at least,
Yeah, a bit too
or
late.
the
And then
Thoughtseize rather.
Yeah, if Phil draws a payoff, it could be pretty good. And also worth noting, Blood Moon would be pretty excellent here for what it's worth. Though obviously it's easy to just pick any random game and say Blood Moon would be good here, but just looking at Jarvis's lands.
Yeah, no, that's why I think it was justifiable to bring 1 in on the play. I don't know if I bring in 2, but I think 1 is justifiable.
Yeah, I'm the kind of, I mean, I've already said 3 times, so maybe it's getting kind of boring now, but if I was Phil, I might have cut all my Lotus Petals and had like 2 Preordain, 2 Blood Moon, and just try and have more real cards, because Jarvis doesn't clock you that quickly. So but I'm not sure.
So I know that is like a common, like I guess I want to say like common knowledge is like you often board out your Lotus Petals against decks that you can go longer against. But I do believe JPA, who is the master of Sneak and Show, like he like rarely boards out Lotus Petal. And I guess I haven't necessarily like heard his logic. Maybe he just wants the ability to like go fast.
Well, he's never lost a game, so he doesn't have to re-examine his board choice.
That's distinctly possible. He actually won last weekend's Legacy Challenge,
Nice.
which is just kind of absurd because he's won so many just playing Sneak and Show, and it's a deck that like on the surface looks so easy to play, but somehow he puts up way more results than anybody else. So
No, I think it's
obviously
really
there's
hard to
something going
play.
on.
I
I don't
tried
think
to
it's
play
really
it.
hard to play. I think it's easier than most decks, but I think it's still hard.
I think it's really hard to play. Well, maybe it's really hard to play, but your decisions don't matter. But I tried it one time, and like, just the deck operates on a way that what normally matters in a game of Magic is so different that it makes it so like he's trying to think how to sequence everything in a way to maximize your win rate, and it just gets like really weird.
So do you
And you
Fate
can
Seal
see
or Brainstorm here?
here. Well, since I have 2 Force of Wills in my hand, I'm just gonna Brainstorm. I just want cards to pitch,
Jarvis feels the opposite. He's like, I'm 100% safe, so I can start winning with this Jace.
Well, also, I don't want to pitch one of my forces to my force, I want to find like random stuff. I mean, also, if you're scared of Beseiju, particularly, I think that would be a good reason to Blood Moon. Oh, yeah. That's.
All right, well, now that he has like 3 counter spells, I think you can just Fate Seal for the win. I think, either way is going to get him there, basically.
Yeah, I guess I just like to Brainstorm because, I don't know. Feels good.
I mean, it's fun to draw cards, right?
Yeah. There we see. It always looks so awkward when you draw your black 8 mana black spell in your like blue red deck, compared to deck like a combo deck like Splinter Twin where all your combo pieces are blue red, or Storm. It just looks particularly strange. But
I think Grizzlebrand breaks a lot of the rules of Magic and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense.
yeah, I mean, it just looks so ugly. Like when you're playing like a Storm deck or when you're playing like a Splinter Twin deck, you never have a card like like just having that Grizzlebrand in hand looks so bad, but obviously in the context deck it makes sense. And now we're just seeing the slow beatdowns. It's without any Bosate, yeah, it's too late, but you know, you gotta play it out. Maybe hardcast an Emrakul, like 8 mana.
I have hardcast Emrakul out of Show and Tell, but only when I played Hive Mind and that deck had Grim Monoliths. So I think if you have Grim Monoliths, you're very unlikely to cast Emrakul, but it's theoretically possible. But when you don't have Grim Monolith, I don't really think you can cast Emrakul.
Oh, I hardcast it all the time when I play against.
It would be funny to like if there was like say you were playing against Dark Depths and they had an Urborg out, it'd be fun to cast Grizzlebrand.
Yeah, that would be pretty good. Oh yeah, some gas. Feels like it's like when your lips are so dry and you just apply the lip balm right now. That's probably what he's feeling, you know?
I mean, I think he knows he's dead, and Jarvis is probably like, well, why are we still playing? I'm just gonna counter this.
Yeah. Jarvis like, if I can't draw cards with my Jace, you can't draw cards with your Preordain. Well, that was a good comeback because Jarvis was dead for a second in game 2. He actually took back the match.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was gonna be dead for a second.
So yeah, Jarvis is up a game. He needs 2 more to clinch it, but Phil's not down and out yet, and he's submitted some spicy decks. So I'm excited to kind of watch the rest. But for now, I'll be taking a break. I guess we'll all be taking another short break and coming back with more Magic soon.
Yep. See ya.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We just saw Jarvis go up a game against Grixis Delver taking down Sneak and Show. I think that's probably what you expect to see. The Delver decks are really meant to prey on combo strategies like that. The classic Delver game, or excuse me,
He
the
was actually
classic.
just playing a Grixis pile, but you still have hymns and stuff.
I'm very sorry. I just caught the end of that just by a second there. But yeah, hymns and Thoughtseize being able to take it down. The way the format works is Phil is going to bring another deck in now and is going to go up against Grixis Control again. And what's he going to be bringing here?
He's going to be bringing humans, which isn't a deck you see every day. I know some people like Eddie Zamora have been a lot, and it's actually I think at GP Atlanta it had like the highest win rate. I think.
Oh wow! And yeah, and before we check out the actual deck list, we have to go. We got to go ahead and thank our sponsors again here. So, Wizards of the Coast, Card Hoarder, and Scott. Thank you so much for supporting the stream. We're so happy to do this and be able to support the legacy format. And this wouldn't happen without them. If you're going to spend your money somewhere, go spend it at Card Hoarder.
Yeah, but now getting back to the deck list, there's a lot of one-ofs. Tomic, pretty new, and it's pretty hyped up in Legacy a little bit, and we haven't seen it a ton. Obviously, it's been being played, but it hasn't seen the same spotlight as Ren and Six, for example.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people that may be familiar with Modern, they're going to see a lot of cards here that look very familiar to them because the Humans deck is very popular in Modern. But this deck occupies a really interesting space in Legacy specifically because very often Legacy is stack based, and you really care about countering spells while they're on the stack, and you care about what's in the hand a lot. But this deck plays to the board a ton. It plays a huge number of threats. I think it's like almost 30 creatures in total, and a lot of legacy decks are not equipped to be able to handle that many threats. There's not a lot of wraths running around. There's not a lot of ton of removal spells running around. So this deck is attacking on an axis. Specifically to just blank a lot of the cards in the opponent's hands and just to make sure that they don't have the answers for the threats that you have.
And especially leveraging Aether Vial, it's one of the most powerful cards in the format, and just being able to play it in your deck is so powerful.
Yeah, Aether Vial, great against counter spells if you're able to stick it. You can invalidate any future counter spells that are drawn from the opponent, and of course, for Cavern of Souls, just blanking sometimes all of the counter spells in the opponent's hand. So, this deck actually has a lot of tools to beat the very powerful decks in Legacy. It's worth noting that this deck often wins by death by 1,000 cuts rather than just one haymaker. So that might just be on the complete opposite end of the spectrum as Sneak and Show.
Yeah, though I think the one particular thing about Aether Vial that makes it so obscene in Legacy is it's a wasteland format. There's so many games where people are struggling just to make land drops, and Aether Vial gives you this insane mana thing that just it's so good on that wasteland axis. But it's going to be interesting because I feel Phil must feel pretty confident because his other deck he had was 4-color Loam, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's supposed to have a bad matchup, but when I play Grixis Control, I guess maybe Grixis Control or Grixis Pile is good versus it, but he definitely feels this Human deck is going to give him a better chance. So we'll see how that goes. It'll be pretty interesting. Palace Jailer,
Yeah.
particularly potent card potentially.
Yeah, and this Humans deck specifically is really really good against sort of the fair blue decks in the format. So basically if the deck is trying to cast Brainstorm or Ponder and do these sorts of things, putting a Thalia in play is a really effective game plan. And if you can make sure you're able to keep it around with a card like Kitesail Freebooter first, you're in a really good spot. But I think our players are ready here, so let's head down to the match.
So I will say, Grixis is also known as the kill everything deck, but the mana base is pretty shaky. So, yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of shaky mana bases, Jarvis's 7-card hand here only has access to a single land in it. Maybe not a hand that you want to keep against the Wasteland deck.
Phil's hand looks really strong. I mean, you have a Wasteland, you have Noble Hierarch, like several 1-drops, Wasteland, just a bunch of gas, only 2 lands.
Yeah, and Jarvis is on the play here, and this 6 looks a lot better. It's got the best card in his deck, Brainstorm. It has a removal spell, multiple lands, and a cantrip, and a Jace, which I'm guessing that's what Jarvis is going to bottom here. 4-mana spell is a lot in the matchup against the Wasteland Thalia deck, so I think we're going to see that go.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Though we might see Jarvis might get punished a bit for his drowning the lock. Phil's deck not running fetch lands.
Hmm.
Jarvis is gonna have to work to turn it on. It's not gonna be able to just kill the noble or
Yep.
mother.
Yeah, you won't be able to fire it off and kill the noble, but Phil does have the wasteland in his hand, so that is one card that's going to go to the Drown of the Lock. And with the presence of Fatal Push in Jarvis's deck, he might even be able to sort of build his way up to Drown of the Lock. Okay, so you're in Jarvis's position here. What do you put back?
Well, you mentioned the Jace, but it seems he actually went for Drown Lock, which is interesting because
Yeah.
once you have your first removal spell, it'll act as a second removal spell. It potentially, I mean, maybe it really depends how. Maybe thought it's too hard to turn on, but if you have one or two removal spells, you can turn it on. And then obviously removal spells seem good against humans, but maybe he wanted preordain. It's a turn one play. He wanted Jace to close the game quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we see a fetch land and a brainstorm in Jarvis's hand. So what do you think about this Gurmag Angler? It's going to be probably turn 3 if you can cast it. Do you think that's quick enough against the humans deck? I mean, the humans deck can really come out of the gates fast,
I
especially
think one
with
of the biggest
Alias.
problems is what do you call it, Reflector Mage, and you also really want a 2-drop to cast, like Hammer Baleful Strix. I could see keeping Gurmag Gangler here, because if your opponent doesn't have Reflector Mage, you could really gum up the board, and you could also have it like in a turn 4, turn 5 play, like let's say Phil starts Wastelanding you. Gurmag's notoriously good at being able to be cast in a Wasteland game where both players are light on resources, but it also is really tempting to have a 2-drop, and it's also really tempting to not get Reflector Maged, and we see him put it on the bottom there.
Yeah. So now put yourself in Phil's shoes. You see Mulligan to 6, turn 1 preordain, bottom. Yeah, I think you just fire off the Wasteland here, right?
Yeah, I could definitely see that being right. Personally, I might be tempted to play Noble because the reasoning would be, I don't want to go on too long of a tangent, but Jarvis just spent his first turn not affecting the board, so
Right.
he used up his mana. So that means, but it's like really complicated actually because then Jarvis untaps with 2 mana. Every turn he has that land in play, he gets some mana out of it. So I guess Wastelanding seems totally fair actually
It's
because it can stop him casting a cantrip to find a second land. So yeah.
Yeah, this is like a classic, deep, almost philosophical question that legacy players run into a lot. And I don't know if there's a right answer a lot of the time, but when you see cantrip like bottom off of preordain or ponder shuffle, man, you have to be thinking maybe they're light on lands, especially after a mulligan. Like I might just be able to get them with wasteland. I think
Yeah, I
that's
think
probably
one of
what
the
was going
things
through Phil's
too.
head.
Yeah, and one of the things too, I think, is you can't be that wrong. But like the upside, so like the upside is if they only have one land and they have cantrips and you wasteland them, that's such a high upside for you. Whereas the upside of you don't wasteland them turn one, it's much harder to notice if there is such an upside to doing
Right.
such a play.
And Phil with a subtly very good draw here. He draws a second Mother of Runes, and one of Jarvis's primary ways to interact with Phil's deck is just having like a pile of removal spells with the lightning bolts and fatal pushes. But if he's able to just untap with a Mother of Runes, it's such an effective tool against that removal. He's
Oh,
probably going to be able to run away with the game. And honestly, it looks like Phil's in a really good spot here, leading off with Thalia.
yeah, I think one of the reasons he might do that is because if he plays both mothers this turn, his hand's just gonna be 2-drop. So maybe he wants to have next turn play 2-drop. That would be, I guess, the reason why he would want to do this. And one of Jarvis's best outs here would be Plague Engineer, but the lieutenant here could maybe buff up the team a bit and make him actually survive that. So Jarvis is gonna. I was gonna say, but I almost forgot about the Thalia. I was gonna say Jarvis close. In my head I thought the Thalia was just a 2/2, and then he could slam Jace, but obviously she's a much better card, and he won't be able to do that.
Yeah,
It'll be
so
interesting.
Jarvis pretty far away from casting Jace here, and that turn Wasteland helping out. But I think you would have Wastelanded before turn 4 anyway, so that Wasteland was going to be good at any point this game. Wow, and a Force of Will on Thalia's Lieutenant here. Okay, so Jarvis is very resource low right now.
Yeah, and maybe part of the reason he's doing that is because he wants to keep Plague Engineer line alive.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh yeah, interesting sequence that he didn't want to pump the Mother of Runes. He wanted to pump the Lieutenant itself, but it makes sense in regards to you're not going to attack with your Mother of Runes. You're going to attack with your Lieutenant.
Right. The counters on Mother of Runes basically don't matter because you almost never want to attack with it. Unless your opponent has 0 cards in hand and you're presenting lethal, you almost never attack with Mother of Runes. I
Yeah,
think it's just such a high upside play to blank a potential removal spell. You basically never run that.
Yeah, like the primary reason you want to counter is just like to hedge against Plague Engineer, but that's then the Plague Engineer kills your lieutenant potentially anyway. So
Yeah, and now Phil has 4 mana available this turn. I think it's very likely that we're going to see double 1-drop into Thalia's lieutenant, and it's going to be very difficult for Jarvis to come back from that.
yeah, I think he really needs to see a Plague Engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he drew Fatal Push, which is even one of the better draws in his deck. Like, imagine if he drew. I mean, I guess him would probably arguably be better because then he could try and take out two cards. But Jarvis, he didn't break. He drew a removal spell. Like that should be good against the All Creature deck. But I think Jarvis is just low on cards from the mulligan from the Force of Will. He can't use all his mana. Phil's just using all his mana, casting a bunch of spells. Jarvis just doesn't have the ability to do that much stuff.
And interesting, we don't see Phil play the Mother of Runes there pre-combat. What do you think he's playing around there?
Pre-combat?
Yeah, to get before the Thalia's lieutenant, just to get the counter on it.
Oh, probably just because the Mother of Rune, when it comes into play, it puts the counter on the lieutenant.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, you think he's just playing around Plague Engineer like wholesale? Okay.
Or like just because the Mother of Runes doesn't attack, so you'd rather have the counter on the lieutenant.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Like the same situation, yeah. But it looks like Phil won there, so it paid off for his deck choice so far. And they're really getting punished for Force of Will. People always say Force of Will, it's pretty broken, but it just made Jarvis too light on resources. He already mulliganed, and yeah. But I think he probably needed to draw like Baleful Strix there. Though Gurmag Angler might have been decent that game, but double Mother of Runes. But it would have been, it was a pretty strong draw. So he actually sides out the Angler, hedging for the Strix potentially. Sides out some Drown and locks.
Yeah, and he has a very, very potent tool in the matchup, which is Blood Moon. Phil's deck save and in Aether Vial, if there's a Blood Moon in play, he's not going to be able to cast any spells for the rest of the game. So that is a very, very volatile card in the sense that it can completely take over a game by itself.
Can you see what that card between Orzhov Pontiff and Deputy is? Because I see a red card there, and I want to be like, well, he can cast that one, but I can't.
I believe that is Imperial Recruiter.
Okay. Oh, he has one sideboard. Yeah, I'll just look at Phil's list. I guess he doesn't have any red card sideboard. Yeah, he does have an Imperial Recruiter sideboard. Yeah, I guess that's not the best card to cast into Blood Moon because obviously you can't really search anything. I guess you can make an army of Imperial Recruiters, but that's not very good.
Yeah, and I think we really got to see game one, the matchup play out as we expected. There were just a lot of small threats coming out of Phil, and they eventually ran Jarvis into the ground. Sort of that death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
And, going into game two here.
I just saw him sideboard out Champion of the Parish. Maybe it's weak against Baleful Strix because usually, at least coming from Modern, having 1-drop's the most important thing. But maybe in this matchup, it's a bit slower, and also it's weak to Baleful Strix potentially, and a bad top deck too.
Yeah, I think it's a bad top deck, and you have the ability to go long. The other thing is that it's one of your cards that doesn't really do anything, right? Yeah, it gets big and it attacks, but it doesn't have any other text on it that actually affects the game state. And I think you're probably more interested in cards that actually interact with your opponent.
Yeah, but it's only 1 mana, so it's not like you're paying the full 2 cost. 1 mana for like giant guy. It's just because like in Modern, you'd like never side the card out, but it's very different in Legacy.
Yeah. And the mana investment, it does matter, but I think the fact that it's a card that you're paying forward as well is really what you care about.
But it can help you like kind of get under Jarvis in a way, especially if you go like turn 1 play it, turn 2 play Thalia, and then you have like this beating in. But it's pretty weak against Baleful Strix and reasons.
Right. Okay, so notes about this game state here. Phil kept a hand that was very insulated from counterspells with the multiple copy of Cavern of Souls and Aether Vials. Jarvis, no counterspells in his opening 7. So he doesn't sort of get the additional advantage from playing those cards. And Phil is going to lead off with a Kitesail Freebooter here to check how he wants to sequence his spells. Most notably, he's going to be able to see what numbers he should name with these Sanctum Prelates in future turns, and that's a really, really big advantage, not doing that in the blind.
It's actually pretty funny how close Phil was to whiffing. We see 3 creatures in the hand.
Yeah.
So it's pretty funny. Imagine, and yeah, we also see Jarvis gets to have, everyone's favorite or Julian's least favorite card, Plague Engineer. So that should be pretty good against the tribal deck,
Yeah, Mark Rosewater often talks about designing cards that are either a rated 5 out of 5 for everyone, or a 10 out of 10 for some people, or excuse me, a 5 out of 10 for some people versus a 10 out of 10 or a 1 out of 10. And Plague Engineer is a pretty high variance card when you ask people to evaluate it. Some people love it, some people hate it. So I think Mark Rosewater says that's a good design.
Yeah, that is
And
true.
okay. If you're Jarvis here, do you just slam this Plague Engineer into play, or do you cast this Brainstorm trying to power out this Gurmag Angler quicker?
The thing is, if you cast Brainstorm, you're not gonna be able to necessarily use all your mana this turn, and also like the longer you hold the cantrip, the more you arguably know what you want to find with it. But it's pretty like complicated to know like the probability you draw 2-drop, how that will cascade the rest of the game. Like just getting your Plague Engineer in play. Maybe you're scared of like Meddling Mage. He doesn't really have a lot of removal. We saw Phil has Meddling Mage in his deck, and also
Right.
it stops the bleeding a bit. It stops the Kite Sail from actually attacking.
Mhm.
It's not like Phil has like really removal. Like maybe you just want to get in play, And also, yeah. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah. And we get to see that interaction that we were talking about, Kitesail Freebooter, seeing what's in the hand and setting up the Sanctum Prelate. Now, the question is, what do you name here? You probably name one. Brainstorm is the best card in Jarvis's hand. You can probably beat a Snapcaster Mage and a Gurmag Angler. And the other thing is, Jarvis doesn't have a way to interact right now, and that's what Phil goes with. Blanking the Brainstorm and any future 1 mana spells that Jarvis could draw.
Yeah.
So Phil looks like he's pulling ahead here, and Phil also has the option of either violing and a couple spells here. Wow, Force of Will is a really really bad draw from Jarvis.
Yeah, I think
Probably the
also
worst draw in his deck.
I think one of the main reasons to name one also is the Snapcaster in hand. If you're not flashbacking a 1, it's going to be really hard to actually use a Snapcaster. It's kind of a
Absolutely.
safety.
Especially in the face of this Thalia that's probably going to come into play via the Aether Vial here.
Yeah. But I don't think he wants to because the Plague Engineer, which kill it. Right?
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess there's no window for you to get a counter on it through Thalia's Lieutenant. So Plague Engineer,
the Plague Engineer is
blanking
definitely
Thalia for
going
the
to do
time
some
being.
work. So, because Jarvis, I mean, I feel all his creatures have like 0 power, so the Angler might actually be pretty good here.
Yeah, Thalia's Lieutenant can come in as a sacrificial body, and
it can actually come in as a combat trick. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just sort of just come in and pump the team, but
it can be the rare combat trick in Legacy. Actually comes in, pumps the team, like surprise him in the middle of a combat by putting counters on something you'd expect out of a game of draft, not out of a game of Legacy.
Yeah.
And it can be especially potent because in Legacy you might, I mean, if you're Jarvis, you see the open deck list, you see the Vial, the deck players, especially if you're just like playing, you don't know what you're playing against. You're just gonna attack, and you will never. It's very hard to see it coming unless you're specifically aware of it because you're not trained to think about combat tricks in Legacy.
Yeah. And Phil naming 3 here on the second copy of Sanctum Prelate, trying to preempt any additional copies of Plague Engineer, which would just be completely lights out.
Oh, I think, but it only stops non-creature ones. So
is it? I'm sorry, Prelate is non-creature here. Yeah, you're 100% correct.
But I'm just looking at Jarvis' list to see what 3-drops he has. I don't actually see that many. I see a couple Colligan's commands and 1 Liliana the Last Hope. So, but I guess Colligan's command is pretty good if you could actually cast it. So it makes sense in regards to that.
Yeah, and we see multiple blank spells in both players' hands right now. So this matchup is all about the board and right now, and Gurmag Angler is dominating it by quite a bit.
Yeah, I think Phil really. If he draws Imperial Recruiter, he could really make a. Well, I guess Reflector Mage, like just Reflector Mage, Palace Jailer would also be absurd here.
Yeah, Palace Jailer would be a great one.
But we can also see him locked out of casting a second Vial, which is actually relevant at this point in the game because you would want to. If you play second Vial, you can take one of them up to 4, and not being able to cast your Vial actually coming up here. Yeah, I definitely think Jarvis is a bit ahead because if Phil doesn't draw a Reflector Mage, he's just going to die to the Angler. And most of his cards don't do anything in the face of this Plague Engineer. So, yeah, I'm trying to see what creatures he has in his deck that he can draw. That would be particularly useful here. No, not just basically like Reflector Mage and.
Did he bring in Deputy of Detention?
I don't think he did. I just remember. Actually, he might have, because I remember I said.
Yeah. Okay. So Phil did bring in Deputy of
Okay,
Detention.
actually, yeah, that
so
makes
he
sense.
has,
Like engineer.
it might be one of his very few answers to Plague Engineer. So
And
that
a
is
permanent one too.
And a permanent one. Well,
Because
a
Reflector Mage-
semi-permanent one with
yeah.
all the removal spells. But yeah.
But I mean, in his deck, he has like no hard removal, almost. So. And also remove. Yeah, but we'll see. See what.
Yeah,
goes
and that's
on
one of
here.
the deck building costs of putting like Ancient Ziggurat in your deck and Cavern of Souls. You know, these lands can't produce mana that cast actual Swords to Plowshares or Lightning Bolt or Fatal Push. You know, these sorts of things.
So there's always the omnipresent Dismember, but it seems he doesn't want to play that in his deck here. I mean, it wouldn't be good against Grixis control anyway. You know, Dismember is not a card that sounds good against the Grixis.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's actually one interesting decision is his Vial. If he has Deputy, he 3 because it's not a human, so his lands can't cast the Deputy. But he doesn't want to use the Vial because the Lieutenant can be used off of it, all the 2-drops in his deck. But yeah, it looks like this is Nightmare. This is becoming Nightmare. And it's kind of a strange game. It almost looks like a vintage shops game or something. It's just like one creature beating over like 10 turns. Both players have like 7 cards in hand and nobody can cast anything.
Yeah, this is it's very funny. In some ways this is very low risk because of spells, but both players have at least 5 cards in hand and a bunch of lands in play.
Yeah, it shows the power of the prison elements that are locking out like almost 10 cards, and I think the particularly impressive Plague Engineer that's literally 1 card stopping like Phil's entire like deck. Like it's even shrinking his creatures on board because these 2/2s they could like if the Plague Engineer wasn't giving the on board cards minus he could make them 3/3s and double block the Angler.
Right.
You know, but like it's not even just stopping his whole hand; it's making his onboard creatures. The Kite Sigil has an attack for like 6 turns. You know, Jarvis could be at like 11 life or something. But yeah, just drawing more 1-drops. But he's like, it's all good. I got Angler.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting way to watch this play out. And like you were saying, it's like a lot of vintage games where sometimes stuff just doesn't happen for like 10 turns, which is crazy because the power level of the decks is so high.
Yeah, because when you look at like Legacy and Vintage decks, you see many powerful cards, and then you watch a game and you see they're all in hand. They can't do anything. One prison piece in play just looks so weird.
Yeah. And subtle play there. Phil, end of turn, Thaliel's Lieutenant to pump his team and then take the Vial up to 3. And I think he's doing that specifically because he knows his one of his few remaining outs is Deputy of Detention, which he can't cast. So
or Reflector Mage, yeah.
Or Reflector Mage.
Oh, but I mean he can cast that. Sorry.
Yeah, he can cast that one though. So he's just sort of maximizing his chances to draw. Okay.
Yeah, or Imperial Recruiter. Oh, he might have boarded the Mage out, but he could also cast Imperial Recruiter and get Deputy. Or is it Toughness 2 or less or Power 2 or less? I think it's Power 2 for the Recruiter.
I knew this, and then they printed Recruiter of the Guard, which was always very confusing because now
I think Recruiter of the Guard is Toughness 2 or less.
Right.
Recruiter is Toughness 2 or less.
I believe Imperial Recruiter is
Imperial
Power.
It's Power. It's Painter, but it's just one of those things. I'm like, wait, because I thought of Recruiter. I'm like, wait, the new Recruiter couldn't get Deputy, but this one can. But yeah, now it's just. It's also weird because the win condition, like all these powerful cards, like you're saying, it's like some random. Well, it's not random; it has a Delph on it, but it's like this common from Fate Reforged, dominating this game with all the most powerful spells of all time.
Legacy's a strange beast like that, but Phil forced to chump block with his Second Prelate on 1 opens up Jarvis's hand, and he's able to finish the game out with a Lightning Bolt. Yeah. All right, so Phil going back on the play here for Game 3. Do you think he's going to change anything about his sideboarding strategy now that he's on the play?
Well, it's interesting because Meddling Mage is one of your 2 toughness creatures. Maybe he's hedging against Pyroblast by not having it in. Or those are Meddling Mages, right? But if I'm on the play, I'd be way more likely to want Champion of Paris, just like use max advantage to push your advantage and get under him because if Jarvis doesn't have a 1-mana removal spell, he's just going to be behind the whole time, taking damage from the champion of the parish. I'm interested, or I guess Orzo Pontiff is to kill Baleful Strix, because that doesn't seem like a particularly good card. I mean, you could also have Knight of Autumn, but I guess that's probably even worse because Orzo Pontiff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I think
Orzhov Pontiff
so.
to kill.
Pontiff, yeah, there are situations that you can set up where Orzhov Pontiff is able to kill Plague Engineer through its haunt ability, so you can get 2 triggers of the -1/-1 in the same turn. It is difficult to set up though.
Yeah, I guess I'm showing that I don't play humans enough because read haunt. It's what does this do? I mean, you kind of know what it does. You kind of read it, but it's kind of complicated to understand. They don't make mechanics like haunt anymore, you know.
Yeah, it's Magic design has changed considerably over the years.
Oh wow,
in
Jarvis,
some ways for the better.
you can actually see you were mentioning last time how Blood best cards, or like not his one of his best cards, but potentially a very powerful card. But it looks like on the draw he might be too slow.
Yeah, you're facing you're facing a Wasteland Thalia deck, and sorcery speed 3-drops. A lot of even though they're incredibly volatile and powerful, they might not where you want to be on the draw.
Yeah, and against Noble Hierarch and Violet might always matter, especially against if your opponent has an Ace or Violet deck.
Right. Okay, we're going into to game 2 here.
Yeah.
Phil on the play, and it looks like he has a functional
Really
hand.
good
Multiple
hand.
Wastelands is something that you really want to see. That's a good start.
Yeah, his hand looks really good to me. I mean, it could be backfire if Jarvis fetches all basic. You're kind of flooded. You don't really have much to do, but you just have a couple 1-drops, a bunch of Wastelands. It looks really good. But Jarvis's hand looks pretty good too. Bunch of just a 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop Brainstorm lands, and he drew the best card in his deck.
Wow, and he draws Plague Engineer. So this game for Jarvis now is all about setting up a turn where he gets to untap with 3 mana available. And right now it looks like he has the tools to do that with the Fatal Push and the Brainstorm able to find more action.
No, it is worth noting that Phil has 2 Wastelands and Jarvis only has 3 lands. So, I mean, Jarvis is going to have a lot of looks as a Brainstorm to take and other blue cantrips if he draws like Ponder. But we could definitely see him getting Wastelanded out. His hand's pretty mana intense. But yeah, Jarvis' hand looks picture perfect to me, basically. Like, this is basically what you draw up as Nut's hand. Looks like he's debating if he wants to push the Noble or not, or which land he wants to play.
Yeah, I think if you put yourself in Jarvis's shoes, because you've now drawn Plague Engineer, I think your goal should be to set up or to slow the game down as much as possible, and eventually, set up as a position where you can draw that, or you can play the Plague Engineer, and that means Fatal Pushing the Hierarch, just because the Hierarch can accelerate things a lot. And Jarvis electing to play a fetch land here, insulating him from Wasteland. Interesting.
Yeah, though you're always going to be exposed on the following turns to Wasteland, though this way you can guarantee cast your hit. But I'm pretty surprised by that. I mean, when one of my opponent plays a Noble, obviously you always like to think about not casting it, and there's some situations where it's very good to not cast it, but it's always so complicated that usually you just want to cast it. I mean, when you're playing against a deck like Infect or like Devoted Druid, where they have other creatures that are so important, a Noble is kind of not operating. They're not playing a normal game, but
yeah,
I would be very tempted to counter it because there's also cards like Solly's that could pump it.
Wow, and it's a very interesting interaction that happened there. Because Jarvis opted to not expose himself to Wasteland turn 1, Phil was incentivized to cast the Sanctum Prelate that turn, so that way he could use all of his mana instead of Wastelanding. So he fires off Sanctum Prelate here, and Jarvis is going to Brainstorm in response as a result.
Yeah.
And now Phil is going to be put to the test. What's the number that you put on the Sanctum Prelate? It's resolving because it got cast off of Cavern of Souls. So what goes through your mind?
I think it's got to be 1 like Jarvis's list. He has so few. He only has 3 3-drops, like I mentioned before. So I think it's got to be 1. But but if I was Jarvis, I'm pretty surprised though because his hand is so good. He has a 1-drop. He has a 2-drop. I just don't want to fall behind. I want time to cast my hymn, but I don't know. It's pretty complicated. It's just always like because he has the Colligan's command and he has so much. But maybe it makes sense to maybe he's like imagining some creatures that he needs to push that have 2 toughness because maybe he's like I don't care about these nobles. Like none of Phil's creatures kill me that quickly. Like maybe particularly Sanctum's the punishing one. and you're like, and look, he's actually completely playing around these two wastelands.
Yeah, that brainstorm finding the copy of Polluted Delta there was like a key interaction in this game. He's not going to get wastelanded this turn, and Phil draws another noble hierarch for the turn, which
Yeah, now Jarvis
gonna get
looks way ahead because when I saw the start, I mean Jarvis' hand was great, but then he kind of didn't do anything a couple turns, and Phil was casting a bunch of spells. He had double wasteland. Jarvis is
jeez.
light on lands, but it looks like this really got turned around a bit. I think I might actually play the wasteland here, but if I, just because there's a good chance. Well, I guess it's because we see what's open here, but there's other cards like Canopy lands you could draw. Or actually, I guess he doesn't have any. He has Rising Canopies.
Right.
But just because of reasons like that, and there's also like some chance your opponent plays both. Maybe you don't want to show it because you don't want your opponent to fetch like a basic, non-basics, and it's obviously obvious because we see the open deck lists. The open hands. But yeah, this is looking really good for Jarvis, though. Jace is gonna be pretty hard to get.
This Plague Engineer is just going to be an insane card when he gets to cast it the next turn. Obviously, getting Mother of Runes and two Hierarchs off the board, shrinking the Sanctum Prelate so he can't effectively attack with it anymore into the 2/2 Plague Engineer. That's strong.
It's gonna kill 3 creatures right now, and then like what's Phil supposed to do? Like he has the Sanctum Prelate, but Jarvis even has Colligan's Command. It's definitely I think winnable for Phil, but it's very very low percent. Just because it's so hard to beat this Plague Engineer. I mean, it not only does it kill these 3 creatures, it makes all your creatures smaller. It means tons of your draws are dead, and you still have this 2/2 Death Touch and play. Like this card's just so crazy against.
It's totally insane, and it's also worth noting that Phil named Wizard off of his unclaimed territory there and not human. That'll allow him to cast any Deputy of Detentions.
Yeah, and now he's like even flooding, but it's such a hard spot. But yeah, for a second I thought you said Jarvis, and I was like, whoa, Noble's a wizard? What's this Cosmic Slays? But
and Phil attacks his Sanctum Prelate into the Plague Engineer here.
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised by that block due to the fact you have Colligan's Command, but like the only reason you would, one reason you want to do that is maybe if you're scared about Kitesail Freebooter taking your Colligan's Command. But there's arguably then Phil would cast. It's hard to know if Phil would cast it pre or post combat. This is sort of like a bluff, maybe attack if he has Kitesail and he wants to bluff 2 damage in. Because basically from Jarvis, this spot you get punished for not blocking if he has Kitesail and takes your K command. Then you'd want to cast all your 1-drops. But if he doesn't have Kitesail, then you just want to take. Wait, isn't it a?
It's a 1/1. Yeah. So I think this is just a misstep from Phil.
No, I think he's bluffing Orzhov Pontiff.
Possibly, but
because he's probably thinking I'm so far behind. Like look at it, he has set like 6 cards in hand. He has like nothing going on. It's probably I can't win unless I somehow attack and get him damage him.
That's possible, but like put yourself in the position of Phil. Even if you do have Orzhov Pontiff in hand, you're still basically 0% to win the game, right? You're 2 for winning yourself from the Plague Engineer after it was already a 3 for 1, and then Jarvis has Lightning Bolt and Fatal Push in hand. Like,
yeah, but I mean, like, also from Phil's side, he's like, how does he ever win? Block for some reason, like that's like, I mean, it might be maybe he can win without attacking, but probably from Phil's side, he probably felt like I have like 6 cards in hand. I just need to hope he doesn't block somehow, but maybe he could win somehow, and it would be a better play to not attack. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Orzhov Pontiff line, I think, is a reason to attack there, but I think, the higher percentage play is probably just hope you draw that attention and hope.
Yeah, and just hope the Sanctum, like, carries the game by shutting down, like what it did. Jarvis had, like, 7 1-drops in hand.
Jeez. Yeah,
this if he draws Palace Jailer, it can be pretty good. So I guess...
Yeah, Palace Jailer is also a potential draw.
I mean, Jarvis does have Snapcaster Mage so that he could kill the Jailer and attack, but from Phil's eyes, he doesn't see the Jace. I mean, he doesn't see the Snapcaster, so he's like, if I draw Jailer, maybe. He has the Cavern to protect it anyway. Yeah, I need the Recruiters can tutor for it. So this Jace, there's no Mantis Rider to protect it. I mean, to attack it. It would even be a 2/2 if he had it in his deck. So yeah.
And I think we're just going to see some Fate Sealing. Yeah. All right, and Jarvis takes this one down. That's I'll be honest, I expected to see humans fare pretty well against Grixis control, but Jarvis was able to ride some Plague Engineers to victory there.
Yeah, Plague Engineers were just like they like 7 for 1 in both games. So
Yeah,
yeah.
Legacy Humans has been a deck that people have fooled around with for a while, and Plague Engineer, it just man, both of those games where Plague Engineer was in play were just completely defined by that card.
It looks like there's a raffle here from Jarvis's win.
Yeah, and let's see what people are going to be trying to win here. And it looks like we have an awesome playmat from Carter. So if you're interested in trying to win this playmat from Carter, type Card Hoarder in the chat, and you might be getting a free playmat coming your way.
Yeah, and this one looks pretty sweet. Very nice design.
Oh yeah, and there's no better cost than free.
Yeah. And yeah, Phil's last deck is a 4-color loam. So we'll see how it fares against Grix's pile.
Yeah, and this is a matchup where both players have quite a bit of card advantage tools. Jarvis has Hymn to Torok, Baleful Strix, Jace the Mind Sculptor, Kolagon's Command, Snapcaster Mage cards like these. And then the 4-color Loam deck has Loam as its engine card, and then some other ways to get virtual card advantage. So
it looks like it has blue with Dovin's Veto, Dovin's Veto and a Leovold. That's some spice. And Oko.
Yeah.
Oko with Mox Diamond. That's definitely a way to easily win. I was actually pretty surprised that Phil picked Humans over this Grixis deck, but I could this Loam deck, but I could see Loam being pretty weak against maybe Jace the Mind Sculptor, and he'd rather try and go under it with Humans.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and it's worth noting Phil is on the ropes here. So he's down 2-0 in this match right now. So he's got to punch his way back. And before the raffle is over, a quick thank you to our sponsors again, as always. Wizards of the Coast, Card Hoarder, and Scott Monroe. Thank you so much for supporting us on this endeavor, and we're very, very happy to be able to broadcast Legacy because everyone knows it's the best format, right?
Oh yeah, especially the other formats are in some dire straits right now.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's a good time to be a Legacy player, especially after the Ren and 6 ban. The format, it's never felt so well, not never, but it feels really open. When Ren and 6 was legal, it felt like if you weren't playing Rug Delver, you weren't playing the best deck, and obviously you could not do that. But if you wanted to win, it would feel bad. And now we see there's all these new decks. People are trying to not sure what's the best Delver variant or Hogak or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like we have a winner for the raffle, Nick Heel MTG. Congratulations, you've won the playmat. So send It's Julian a message on Twitch, and he'll help coordinate getting you that playmat. Awesome. All right, and I believe we're going to take a quick break here before the third match. So we'll see you guys in a bit.
Welcome back for match number 3 of Jarvis U versus Phil Gallagher. And we'd like to start off by thanking our sponsors, Wizards of the Coast, Card Hoarder, and Scott Monroe. This is Phil's last possible loss. He's lost his first 2 rounds against Jarvis, and he's on his last legs. John, what is Phil playing for this round?
Yeah, so he's playing a pretty sweet brew. It's I guess we'll call it 4-color blue loam. So I like how we put the lands first, then everything else later. So it has just like a bunch of solid creatures that you would expect in this kind of deck of neither Reliquary, Dark Confidant, but then we get some spicy ones like a Leovold that you can green some Zenith for, and then you have the 3-drop Planeswalkers of I guess of old and new. So you have Liliana of the Veil, and then you have Oko. So a pretty dense threat package, but still just a Mox Diamond Chalice of the Void deck. So trying to kind of like produce, like by playing Chalice of the Void, you don't want to play many 1-drops. So now you're trying to have 2 mana on turn 1 and then go from there.
Do you think that the blue cards will be a big impact in this matchup? Like, do you think Oko and Leovold are going to be enough to sway a normal 4-color loam list versus what Jarvis is playing?
I do. So Phil doesn't really get punished that much other than the Blood Moons, I believe, are in Jarvis's sideboard. But just for the sake of game 1, Oko provides a 3/3 every other turn, which is pretty decent against a control deck. And Leovold being able to draw cards and can sometimes be limiting to like Kolagon's command, and like if it's not addressed, then like you can't use Ponder and Brainstorm to help dig for answers. So I do think the blue helps in this matchup.
There's also a sweet and spicy sideboard card, Dovin's Veto. It's a little awkward in my opinion, just because you need 2 of your splash colors to cast it, but it could end up being very good against this Grixis style control deck.
Yeah, I do think the Bitter Blossoms are also interesting. It'll be like Jarvis knows the list, so I wonder if he'll still have Plague Engineer to be able to name both the human on Dark Confidant and the Fairy Rogue if he were to bring it in. So there's some interplay there.
All right, so why don't we switch over to what Jarvis? I guess we've already seen Jarvis's deck list.
Yeah, we've seen it too many times, so we could probably just go down to the match.
Sounds good. All right, and Jarvis is on the play.
1 land, no cantrip. Doesn't look good.
No, but I really like Phil's hand.
Yeah,
Possibility of a turn 2 Liliana of the Veil is very good.
Yeah, and kind of doing what I explained when we're talking about the deck, that you want to be able to produce 2 mana on turn 1 because you're sacrificing 1-drops to be able to play Chalice of the Void. So Mox Diamond, you want in every opening hand if possible.
I really like Jarvis's 6-card hand. If I were in Jarvis's seat, I'd probably be putting one of the Polluted Deltas on the bottom. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree. So your Brainstorm can kind of like shape up your hand, but the times that you're drawing spells, it's probably not that bad for you. Like it's only bad the times you get Wastelanded. But since Jarvis is on the play, he really wants to be able to Thoughtseize on turn 1, so that's kind of a lock to like keep. And then the Lightning, like having Thoughtseize on turn 1 kind of educates how Lightning Bolt gets to act. So if Phil has no creatures in his hand, then he could just shuffle away the Lightning Bolt in search for like the extra land. But he's allowed to not have to Thoughtseize Dark Confidant, for instance, the times where he's allowed to keep Lightning Bolt. So just like probability wise and opportunity wise, it's probably better to put a land on the bottom.
So this Thoughtseize is super interesting because theoretically, Jarvis could be thinking, hey, if I put the Liliana to the graveyard, we're adding in sorcery and Planeswalker, and then Phil will play Mox Diamond putting a land to the graveyard, and all of a sudden this Tarmogoyf is out of Lightning Bolt range. Yeah. So Jarvis could make the next level play of keeping this Tarmogoyf within Bolt range, but I don't think it's worth it. It's just
the last thing to consider is like you might not be that afraid of Liliana. So personally, I've had a lot of experience where you can just like fight Liliana by playing Snapcaster Mage and Lightning Bolt, like sometimes together, sometimes separately. But like a Liliana of the Veil in the turn cycle isn't that bad. But taking the Mox Diamond is pretty much a time walk, which is
really good. I like that play a lot.
Me too. Like the only thing it makes kind of rough is like your Lightning Bolt wasn't killing the Tarmogoyf anyways, so it doesn't really change that math. So you really are just taking an extra turn. And then it makes cards like Maze of Ith a lot worse because you're investing a land drop and you're like you're not ahead the land drop from Mox Diamond.
And it's interesting that we're seeing Baleful Strix come back now that Renin 6 is out of the format, which is traditionally very good against Tarmogoyf-esque decks, being able to block this huge dumb creature that gains you no value and creating a 2-for-1 card advantage.
Yeah, Strix is definitely better against the builds that aren't playing Punishing Fire Grove with the Burned Willows.
I don't know how good Punishing Fire is right now in the metagame.
Yeah, I agree. But I think we'll circle back to it eventually. So Jarvis's Baleful Strix finding the third land is pretty good for him here. So he's definitely going to play the land, but he's thinking about how he wants to progress from here. So he knows part of Phil's hand. He knows Assassin Trophy onward, or Mazavith onward. So he knows that the threats are going to be coming, but also just a stream of card advantage. So this is like a pretty important turn, even though it doesn't look like on the surface there's many decisions to be made.
That was interesting. I'm not saying that Jarvis misplayed, but if I were in Jarvis's seat, I would have considered playing Snapcaster into Thoughtseize to hit the Liliana. But like you said, maybe Jarvis isn't afraid of it.
It also makes your Brainstorm really bad.
Okay.
So I can see some appeal to the times where Liliana isn't cast, like a 3-drop isn't cast, then you're allowed to Brainstorm Drown in the lock this turn.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and he knows this Lightning Bolt is either destined to try to trade with the Liliana of the Veil or just should be shuffled away. So I think a lot can go wrong. And like Thoughtseize isn't as good when your opponent's brainstorming plus like every turn, like being able to
That's
go
true.
somewhere between recall and brainstorming.
All right, we saw Phil pay 4 life right there. And Chalice of the Void.
Yeah, paying 4 life, I would have been tempted to take all the cards, but I've definitely dealt 16 to myself with the library, just not being aware of how much I was taking. So I like the conservativeness.
That was a pretty good brainstorm for Jarvis.
So one hard dance is like a subset of the time you could just say like this chalice doesn't matter, and it's easy when you have Golgong as command in your hand, but this isn't one of those times. So he might just drown in the locket.
Seems very reasonable. John, what would you be putting back here?
Probably the bolt, unless if you're trying to pair off that bolt with the Liliana of the Veil. You're definitely keeping Snapcaster. The extra land doesn't seem necessary. So if you're playing Drown in the Lock, I could see yourself putting back Underground Sea, and then like we will potentially draw the Lightning Bolt.
Okay. So I had a thought, maybe you can tell me why it's wrong. You're a much better blue wizard than I am. But I was thinking about maybe the Force of Will, so that way next turn you could Snapcaster Drown in the Lock. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that might just be better. So I'm trying to think. We need like a plan for ending this game, because yeah, so from your point of view, you're saying you want to set up a line where you end up with the Snapcaster and play anyways?
Correct.
Okay. That's probably just right then. Like, I think Sylvan Library just puts such a slant on the match where you just have to be the aggressor even if you're not able to. So I actually think that might have been a better play. But what I was thinking was exactly what's happening here, where you can like set up a Snapcaster Thoughtseize and hold up Force of Will for like the aggressive plan.
Looks like Snapcaster Brainstorm. Triple
that
land.
would make sense because you have the Force of Will, so you kind of like take the turn back. But now we have like 4 lands in play, so which I don't know how ideal that is, which is part of why I lean towards like shuffling away on the Brainstorm. But I guess like you have Force of Will and like Snapcaster Drown for like the next 2 turn cycles. So being aware that the major threats you had to deal with that you already know about are Tarmogoyf and Liliana of the Veil, I think the Force of Will like makes sense in that sequencing. So even if he didn't have the good fortune of just having this extra Snapcaster Mage, just needing to commit mana and do things, I think is important.
Blast Zone's looking real good right here.
Yeah, it will potentially kill your own library, but by that point you're already like the damage was already done. Like
Yeah.
just look at how many cards Phil's able to look at in his green deck versus the cards that like Jarvis has looked at.
You said Sylvan Library was Brainstorm earlier. Right now, I
Yeah.
wish that this was a Brainstorm for Phil because I would love to get rid of this Maze of Eth.
Yeah, I guess it's just Sensei's Divining Top. I mean, the Maze of Eth can like still pairs well with the Liliana of the Veil over time. Like just being able to like blank one thing and edict just means that your Liliana of the Veil's at 1 and is fine for a while. Like barring like Burn Spell or Kolaghan's Command. And it looks like he's taking this time to like set up exactly that line. And I do like him not playing the land first because the land like doesn't do anything, but it helps conceal what your intention is with the Liliana Planeswalker ability.
All right, I'm just going to ask you instead of using Google because I'm lazy. Doesn't Blast Zone come into play tapped?
Nah, it just comes into play with a counter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess there's no reason to show it then. Okay.
Yeah,
So I like this play by Phil.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. So land's not ideal here, but you still get to keep up Snapcaster, Drown in the Lock, but Jarvis is starting to fall behind. Once again, just like his deck's not the best at trying to be the aggressor. So like one advantage playing a Grixis Delver style deck would have in this exact situation. Sure, like some of the cards would have been different, but like being able to wasteland that Maze of Ith is just worth so much like equity. But Jarvis'
agree
deck
with
doesn't
that.
have the potential for that.
Here we're seeing Blast Zone come down. I actually don't mind taking the Abrupt Decay here. Oh, that's weird. I don't know how much I like this, but we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah.
I like the idea of just decaying the Snapcaster and mazing the Strix to buy time.
Mm-hmm. Well, what would have you preferred to do this turn?
I might have just passed, honestly.
Hmm.
Because I think right now Phil's winning the long game.
So decay doesn't hit anything other than these types of creatures, right?
Correct.
So in theory, like you're getting the board to parity and you have a library in play. So from Phil's side, what would he fear? I guess it would be like some weird Jace the Mind Sculptor turn where, yeah, so you can't both decay and trophy. So the times where you're committed to decaying, you can't trophy, which means he would be able to brainstorm into Force of Will. Like, it depends on if you're trying to like play to not lose and play to win. And it's weird to say that when it feels like Phil has the advantage, but it's like he would only be able to cast one of those spells. So actually, I think it's fine to just like play your Tarmogoyf there because if you're trying to like your colored mana is pretty taxed and your life total is really the only way you're going to lose this ish. So then you want to be able to use like these color intensive cards when you only have 3 colors. Like
I get that. I just don't think that Phil's under a lot of pressure at the moment because of the Baleful Strix is really the only thing dealing the damage, or at least that was my thought at the time.
mm-hmm.
But I'll be completely honest, I wasn't considering Jace the Mind Sculptor off the top. I was just trying to think of average draws from Jarvis, and Jace the Mind Sculptor clearly could happen. I mean, it's what, turn 7 in the game, and we haven't really seen that many good draws out of Jarvis.
Yeah, so I would have liked just like playing the Tarmogoyf and end of turn decaying. So like you just take the extra hit that one time. You're still not in like snap bolt range, bolt snap bolt range. So I feel like Jace
Ooh, and
brainstorming
there it
into a Force
is.
of Will is the only way you lose. But now he has a trophy, so he can do it in response to the brainstorm.
Which will turn on the Revolt for Fatal Push.
Yep. Yeah, that's all true. But if push comes to shove, like Phil can still. Oh, that's funny. I didn't even intend that one. He can still take up the blast zone to 2, and like the library damage has been done. But yeah, losing the knight in this exchange is not like wasn't on the menu for me, which like feels kind of bad. But you definitely have to trophy there because all the times Force Will blue cards hit, it's really bad for you.
Lightning Bolt's a pretty nice pickup here. But it looks like
Mhm.
Jarvis is willing to put it back. Phil's life total is getting to that point where a Snapcaster off the top plus this bolt could be the game.
Yeah, so I pretty much want to put back the Force and the Delta. It's hard to keep Force when you know that next turn they're going to play their best card in the top 3.
I'd agree with that. This seems very much like Jonathan's Zucanic style Magic.
It's actually like not as elegant as I would like, which is why I played Delver. I feel like you are just sledgehammering people with how good your cards are, and I like playing bad cards.
I've seen you play Modern. You like those big blue decks.
Yeah, because they play bad cards.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. I like to feel something when I play. Like, I like to feel like I achieved something because my cards are so bad that like I happen to win. But this deck plays way too many good cards, so I have like a quota. But
Yeah. All right, we
maybe I'll do
finally
it
see
one
the
day.
night die.
Yeah.
And now the swing comes in. Phil's going to drop to 7.
Yeah, so Phil has the Blast Zone, which is good. Cabal Pit's actually a pretty good draw too, but like I still think like Phil feels like a favorite, but how many Jaces does he play?
Cowgan's Command could also be the game coming up soon.
Yeah, I'm just using Cardboard.Live to see what Jarvis has access to. Yeah, so Jarvis drawing a Jace, a Kolaghan's Command, and the third Snapcaster are probably the best cards.
Cabal Pit going back on top. So I was thinking back to what we were discussing with the brainstorm, and I think it might have been right to put the lightning bolt on top just in case Phil happened to draw into Liliana of the Veil that turn.
Oh, because he didn't have any red mana.
Exactly.
Uh,
Because that lightning bolt wasn't doing anything, and if Jarvis is just going to fetch this turn anyway, it might have been
yeah.
better to keep
You're
the.
actually correct for another reason too. So he didn't play land that turn, so he can play the Delta, and then he has like Lightning Bolt on top of his deck for the times where Phil plays a Chalice on 1, like where it's like a pretty weak Sylvan Library, but like they're functionally the same thing. Like you are drawing one of them, and you're not doing anything in between.
Here's a tough choice. Do you take the pit or do you take the Heath for the shuffle?
I'm pretty sure I take the Pit. So like I just want to play around like the third Snapcaster, and then we could we're getting one extra. Like you're still looking at one extra card every turn, but then we can do the full like new like the shuffling for your top. Like we could do that next turn. So like I just like this insurance for the times where there's an end of turn like Snapcaster, but there's not many things good to Snapcast in the graveyard. So maybe it was fine to take the Heath, but I feel like you want to remove a spell anyways. So imagine the times where Jarvis draws like Gurmag Angler. Like you actually really want this Pit because it functionally deals with the Angler because now the Maze moves on to like dealing with that, and you don't
Oh
really want to
no.
blow this Blast Zone.
Oh no. I don't like this.
What don't you like?
Dark Confidant. It's going to be Phil's demise.
Well, but he has Sylvan Library, so he just draws a land off of it every time.
We'll see.
I think that's one of the better draws.
I'm nervous. I don't like dying to my own cards. That's
Hmm.
why I play a million Chrome Moxes in my deck.
Yeah, you do play ad nauseum though.
All right, so Jarvis has drawn the Gurmag Angler that you had previously talked about.
Yep, which makes this Pit really good. From Jarvis's side, this Lightning Bolt, it's like a pretty big decision, but I think it's like if you're Jarvis, how you're winning, and one of the easy ways is Jason Mind Sculptor. But the problem is like Phil's not going to blow this Blast Zone unless if he really has to, and like Jace qualifies as like a really has to. So like if he has enough mana to be able to like up the Blast Zone and such, like this bolt doesn't matter in the subset of times where you're trying to win the game with Jason Mind Sculptor. So I do think you have to Lightning Bolt this Dark Confidant because like what I was alluding to earlier, you can functionally just take 0 damage probabilistically.
Okay.
A question for me is like, do you now have to Pit on this end step? That way you have enough mana to be able to Blast Zone up to 4 for the times where Jason Mind Sculptor's drawn. And I think the answer is yes.
Phil would agree with you. Our chat is not a big fan of Chromox. I am shocked.
Oh, well. But both you and one of my best friends love playing, Tess, so I I'm on your side.
Nice. Well, that makes 3 of us.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing Oko here, which is a huge draw. So we're seeing the blue come into play. Oko is going to turn this Mega Angler into an elk.
Yeah, in fact, like both the blue cards that we alluded to earlier, Oko and Leovold, would have
Ooh,
been
food token.
pretty good draws. I think food token makes sense, right? Like it's already checked with the Maze of Ith. Like he doesn't have Wasteland in his deck, and he doesn't have a way to give Mega Angler like protection from anything. So like there was little ways that was going to go wrong on the turn cycle once the Oko did resolve. But Kolaghan's Command is probably one of the better draws for Jarvis. He doesn't have a Brainstorm in the graveyard, because ideally you would want to like Kolaghan's Command. You want to do the whole Corey Burkhart thing, which is like you want to be able to Kolaghan's Command, get back Snapcaster, Kolaghan's Command, get back Snapcaster, and then what does the last Snapcaster do? And ideally that's like a Brainstorm, or maybe like a Drown in the Loch. But that's like not on the table right now because there are no cantrips in the graveyard.
This has been a pretty crazy first game of Magic.
Yeah, drawing the Sylvan Library on turn 2 or turn 1, like after the Thoughtseize, was just pretty like it shaped the game in a certain way.
I know a lot of people feel like Jarvis might be out of this, but he's still very much in this match, or at least in this game, I should say.
Yeah, like Kolaghan's Command is like definitely a step in the right direction, and he has so many cantrips in his deck that even though he has a 33 card deck, he kind of just has like a 13 card deck.
What are the odds this game ends with decking?
I think like lower than 5%.
Okay.
But non-zero.
Stay tuned. We'll find out.
Well, I just think that do you mean Jason Mind Sculptor Ultimate, or do you mean natural decking?
No comment.
I probably should have clarified that one. But I do think on average, like, I didn't count literally how many threats and answers are in both decks, but I presume that the Loam deck has more threats than... Actually, no, that might just be right.
I have a silly question for you, John. Once again, I refuse to Google. Oko's Ultimate steals a creature. What's the condition on it?
The creature has to have power 3 or less.
Okay.
So Strix...
Wow. That was a very good draw for Jarvis.
Yeah, so he's drawing all of his creatures, which is exactly what he needs. So I feel like at some point Phil is probably going to try to animate. So this is very good by Jarvis. He's pretty much like playing those out. So like he has this extra Snapcaster in his hand, so Phil knows that like Snapcaster Kolaghan's Command is on the table. But what he doesn't know is this extra Kolaghan's Command, and like Phil's just falling behind. And I actually think at some point this Blast Zone might get cashed in just to deal with a Strix and a Snapcaster Mage. So he's kind of like treading water, because Oko is very hard for the Grixis deck to kill.
So one thing I would like to see Phil do is make another food token here.
Yeah.
And then gain 6 life, then next turn possibly cash in a card off Sylvan Library, because he is falling behind. And this would be a nice way of Phil to get back in it.
Yeah, I agree that exactly, like, I don't know about future turns, but exactly this turn, you need to make another food token. For a couple of different reasons. This is probably one of the bigger ones. Kolaghan's Command didn't have a good second mode before, and you already know that he has a Snapcaster, that Jarvis has a Snapcaster.
Oh no, is he making an elk? Oh no, Phil's making an elk.
Which like Jarvis was going to play Snapcaster on the end step no matter what.
Phil, you're letting me down. I'm rooting for you. Come on.
Yeah, I guess, okay, so in Phil's defense, he thinks this is the last Kolaghan's Command, and what that allows you... So, in Phil's defense, though, what this does do is the times where you crack this fetch and you Sylvan Library, and then you want to keep your card, and then it stops them from being able to, like, end of draw step, Kolaghan's command, make you discard and get something back. So all the times where Jarvis doesn't do this, like, it's fine, but I still would have made the food. I don't think that time is worth it.
So if you're in Phil's seat, can you expect that Jarvis would play more than 2 copies of Kolaghan's command? Because like he just saw the first after a very long game. If I was in Phil's spot, I wouldn't bank on my opponent having more copies. Maybe
Wait,
that's a
don't they have
rough.
deck list?
I thought it was 2. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, he has 2.
Okay.
So
But
like he just played in flashback to one of them. You mean like play around the second?
yeah, like that seems like playing to a small percentage. Granted, it's happening right now, but I don't know if I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jarvis, after we mentioned not having a lot of good draws another Jace the Mind Sculptor. So Jarvis, after drawing a number of lands in a row, is finally digging back into this game.
Yeah, to be fair, he did kind of have like a 13 card deck. Like he just has so many cantrips he hasn't like seen or gone through. Like, let's see, he played that Brainstorm, flashback that Brainstorm. I think he's only played a Brainstorm and no Ponders.
And now we're seeing Blast Zone go up.
Okay, but this is a fresh Sylvan library, so a good library here can be like.
Ooh, Blast Zone on 3, not 2.
He probably just didn't have enough mana, did he? Or maybe that's a misclick. I don't know.
I think the Blast Zone's eyeing Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Right. What did he tap his mana for the previous? Oh no, he cracked the food, so he didn't have enough mana. That's correct. This is not the ideal library though. Man, I feel bad for Phil though. I felt like he was kind of like far ahead for a bit, but just like not like I'm just like a string of lands made it very difficult.
And Jarvis on the end step with the Snapcaster Bolt, most likely.
Yes. Yeah.
We could be looking at lethal next turn. Phil will go up to 12. I guess not, because the Elk is going to get hit by Maze of Ith.
Yep. And like the food token gain 3 every turn, but it could still end with decking, which I didn't factor into my percentages before. But
so maybe I missed it, but there's a Jace in the graveyard, a Jace in play. Did Jarvis draw a third Jace, or is that the second Jace that's still just hiding out in Jarvis's hand?
It's a third Jace. He plays 3.
Okay, so this is not looking good for Phil.
I agree. Yeah, and now all the cantrips are coming, which means that Jarvis can. So you can like brainstorm and then use preordain to just like reset the brainstorm. It's like better than how Ponder interacts with brainstorm, because you like definitely want those cards on the bottom. And now like my rule of thumb is like you just never plus with Jace. You just always brainstorm, because at some point you can just form a hand with like 6 counters and then like any amount of creatures, and then you'll be fine.
So the Shaheen Sarani School of Jace the Mind Sculptor wrote like a 4,000 word essay for Star City Games on that.
Yeah, and I got paid 0 to tell everyone here that for free. So, yeah.
So if you appreciate John's advice, maybe you should donate to Legacy Premier League.
Yeah. Or me. I'll either one, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Jarvis ignoring Oko, which is correct, because all Oko's can do is plus to gain 3 life every turn. Like it can't really do much more than that, because like turning things into 3/3s doesn't really like do anything.
This is a tough spot for Phil. Not on top of Jarvis's board, but right now he's looking to fade the Snapcaster Bolt just because Phil is acknowledging that he needs to fetch in order to win this game, but he's within Lightning Bolt range.
Yeah, but like you just like needed to see more cards. Like the EV of that like fetch land was like a lot higher, like cracking it than leaving it in play. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure this one's over. So yeah, like super interesting game though. Like it went from feeling like Jarvis was kind of behind from the Sylvan Library to like Phil not being able to find enough traction to be able to produce a surmountable advantage other than just card quantity. And I don't know, there's like a lot of really interesting decisions, such as like that brainstorm that we talked about for a bit, involving the what to put back between Force of Will and like Lightning Bolt. And like I think one of the most important parts was the turn that Jarvis drew Jace the Mind Sculptor to pair with a Fatal Push to be able to kill the Knight of the Reliquary. If that Knight lived for a turn, I think it would have been really good, because then you would have like repeated shuffles on your Sylvan Library, and you can like look for Wastelands or other utility lands. Like, who have been able to get Cabal Pit into play directly.
That makes sense. I wonder how different this game would have been if the Mox Diamond wasn't taken on the first turn.
I feel like, I mean, Phil would play turn 1 Sylvan Library then. So
that is true.
And then at that point, when you're playing a turn 1 library, you can probably take 8 a lot more often than you have to take 4, because then you like dig deeper sooner. I mean, it depends on if you see a fetch land in that, but yeah, there were a lot of like really interesting decisions on both sides. Like,
all right, so hypothetically, let's say Phil does not win this game. Do you keep in Mox Diamonds?
I haven't really played from their side, but I feel like, so you're playing against like a Thoughtseize Hint deck. So
correct. They also have Calgan's Command too.
Yeah,
so it could be similar to like the Sneak and Show, like boarding out Lotus Petals against the Hymn deck. Mox Diamond is very similar, except it actually costs you card advantage.
Yeah, so they're resetting the game really quick, so don't worry. We'll get it back to the proper state. But yeah, so I think, yeah, it's similar to like the boarding out Aether Vial in your like grindy matchup situations, where just like the raw count of cards can matter so much. Like a deck that's playing Hymn to Torok is not necessarily saying like, hey, I just want to like be trading like all willy-nilly. It's just like, no, I'm just gonna bury you like with card advantage. So like, I want to turn 2 Hymn you, maybe even turn 4 Hymn you with like a Snapcaster or something like that. So I can see.
I've never had that happen to me.
Never? Wow. No wonder
very,
why.
Very lucky.
Yeah. Just one of the best test players in the world.
Nah, I'm okay. Your friend's better.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out to AJ Kerrigan.
He is a powerful wizard.
And definitely a powerful friend. So what would you sideboard from the loam side? So you suggest taking out like Mox Diamond, but it's hard because like you can be very explosive on the play. Like you can play a card on turn 1 before like they play land. So like for instance, a turn 1 Sylvan Library where the opponent like has to play a force, or like you're given the opportunity to play Thoughtseize on it.
This is interesting. Phil's eyeing siding out the Green Sun package, which I don't know how I feel about, but the targets aren't spectacular here, and there's no copy of Scavenging Ooze by the looks of it, and that's a card I would actually really like in this matchup.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Thalia is very good, by the way.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like like you're not really being that aggressive in this style, but boarding out Chalice. Okay, I think that makes sense to me. So you're boarding out Chalice instead of Mox Diamond. That way you can just like be faster on the play. And you probably also need fixing for these vetoes. You mentioned that's like off of your 2 splash colors.
Yeah.
So
Lomer Boy in chat says that there is a scavenging ooze. I just can't see it on my screen. It might be hidden underneath that way from the loam.
It's under the 2 loams and above the 2 separate libraries.
So if that's the case, I would personally leave in the Green Sun, just because I think the value of that card is very high in this matchup.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also feel like being able to get Leovold is just like pseudo Elvish Visionary, which is like, as we see from the Elf stack, like they will Green Sun for Elvish Visionary sometimes.
We didn't really talk about what Jarvis did, so maybe it'll be a surprise.
I think he side out a Force of Negation and just...
Looks like there was a Plague Engineer that came
on the
in.
draw. So the triple wasteland hand is not exactly what you want to be doing on the play, so probably has to be a mulligan. While Jarvis's hand looks like a keep, just a normal like brainstorm hand. You have force of will, so you won't get turn 1 chaliced. And then we see the Plague Engineer, which, as I discussed in the pregame, like it'll be interesting to see how Plague Engineer pairs off against Bitter Blossom.
Jarvis's hand is just stacked. I think it's going to be a tough battle for Phil.
Yeah, just force of will, like even this card disadvantage, when you're on the draw, like you're trading force of will and your advantage of being on the draw for like a very precise like Thoughtseize time walk sort of thing, where you're like able to do your normal development, but you're like taking likely their best card because you chose the force of will and you like took their turn.
Looks like Jarvis is looking at another copy of Force of Will and then drawn in the lock.
Yeah. So when your opponent leads on fetch land and you know you're, I don't know, 80% to need to force of will on turn 2, it's kind of difficult. So if you do force of will on turn 2, then you like definitely want to pitch another blue card. So I think that's what he's trying to think about. Does he want to force pitch force, or does he want to force pitch drown in the lock? Because you likely want to keep this brainstorm. And I do
agree.
like force pitch force a lot better.
Well, the Drown in the Lock will have more value as the game goes on as well. Snapcaster Mage and other cards. It's not a 2-for-1.
Mm-hmm.
And Mox Diamond not looking great right here.
Yeah, it would have been really great in the opening hand, but not ideal in this as the draw step. And Sylvan Library definitely like produced a large amount of advantage in the game 1, so rightfully so, force of willing it. And then now there's 2 cards in the graveyard for this Drown in the Lock, so it could be tough like for Phil regardless. Like Phil happens to not have a 3-drop here, so he has to just run out another 2-drop. So the advantage to playing the ooze is that you attack for, I don't know, potentially more sooner, and you can eat your own graveyard for Drown in the Lock, which like I guess you'd really just do in response to the spell. Like you value your lands in the graveyard, and you did board out Tarmogoyf, so it might not matter as much as it would normally. But you do have Loam in your deck still too, so you can't take out your lands. So this Drown in the Lock has some amount of like limited shelf life if not played on this ooze that's probably going to trade off with anyways.
A 3rd copy of Force of Will for the Bitter Blossom.
I don't even know how much he cares about the Bitter Blossom. He might just let the Bitter Blossom happen, play Plague Engineer with Force of Will back up, and then like let the Bitter Blossom slowly kill him.
That is a good point.
So I wonder what he names here. So I don't think any of the creatures overlap with the Bitter Blossom, and he doesn't know about the Bitter Blossom. So yeah, human is what I would have named too, because it hits Knight of the Reliquary, like make it a little bit smaller, which isn't as relevant, but really Dark Confidant. You're worried about like very efficient, like this turn where he can go like Dark Confidant and Bitter Blossom or something. So you want to be able to like name something that cuts off how the turn cycle can go badly in terms of you being forced to play Force of Will.
So this is going to be really interesting. If Phil can draw a 4th mana source here, it's possible that Phil has Assassin's Trophy backed by Dovin's Veto to protect and bring this Bitter Blossom back online.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do it in your upkeep?
Yeah, that he wants. It's like a slightly greedy play. He's trying to get the token. He's just not respecting Force of Will. And I guess if you know you're going to draw Abrupt Decay, then I guess it's fine. Strix into Strix is like a Bitter Blossom that you didn't have to pay life for. Okay, so this time it can't go wrong, so... But Phil at 11 life. I've played a lot with Bitter Blossom in my lifetime, and it's like really hard to manage how like the life works with regards to like how you're supposed to both mount an offense and trade things off. So similar to Sylvan Library, it's going to produce an advantage, but unlike Sylvan Library, you just can't stop at some point. You literally have to kill it.
Wasteland. That was the best draw for
Ooh.
Phil right there.
I agree. He still needs an answer to this Plague Engineer, but now the second Strix doesn't come online, which is really good. I guess it didn't matter, but red. So he cared more about Bolt. I guess that can make sense. I feel like I would have cut off the cantrips myself, but regardless, draw step says that it doesn't matter. And Jarvis actually played fairies. We've played a fairies mirror before in standard, so he understands, like with this Coal Guns command, that Coal Guns command killing a token doesn't feel fantastic, but actually is fantastic. Like your opponent is on a clock by Bitter Blossom being in play, so you're similar to like playing Pepper Smoke in the Fairies Mirror. It's just like, yeah, I can just get rid of this token for a turn, but it's actually like a full time walk. It's not just a token. Like every point of life you deal is like a fair you dealt with in the future or a turn that you acquired.
This is just brutal.
It also just lets him play another Plague Engineer this turn, like in the turn cycle.
Show some discipline there by not blocking the Plague Engineer.
Yeah, so he's able to get Cabal Pit. I'm trying to think. What
there is Threshold.
Means of it. What was it?
I was agreeing with you. Phil has Threshold, so that will work.
Yeah.
I think you have to sack the Bayou floating a black, so that way you can keep open the veto. I don't know if that's wrong or not, but that's what my initial thought is.
Yeah, it looks like he agrees with you. I'm just trying to think how we're getting out from under our Bitter Blossom. This deck doesn't really have ways to gain life outside this News. But I guess first things first. Okay, we found an answer to our Bitter Blossom. But he's kind of priced into blocking the Plague Engineer. Or like he has to veto this Fatal Push. And then he has to chump block the Plague Engineer. And Jarvis plays the Strix first because, like, he's going to push anyways and play the Strix, but you might as well draw the card first to educate yourself just in case something changes.
You could draw your fourth copy of Force of Will.
Yeah, but he knows the only counter is Dovin's veto, so like doesn't matter, but he's gonna do it anyway. So like he's not really tipping his hand. So like it's a small sequencing thing that you see a lot of like more experienced players shortcut. That like if I know I'm gonna do both these things, I should just acquire more information. It also conceals your hand. So if you play Fatal Push then play Strix, then like you knew that Fatal Push was already in the hand. But like, if you played Strix and then drew a card, then some percentage of the time they drew the Fatal Push. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
What is Phil tanking about here?
I don't know. Maybe he's just,
you can't cast a Replicate.
Yeah. Maybe he's really just hoping that the top of his deck is really good. So he thinks that, if he just pauses, takes some time to reflect.
Let's do some advertising for Phil. If you would like to learn how to cast Dovin's Veto, you can follow Thraben University.
Yep, it is a white card, so it makes sense.
2 life.
Not great, Bob. So no matter what, you need to be able to abrupt decay your Bitter Blossom before your turn starts, because once the trigger's on the stack, you don't have a way to gain life instant speed. So neither Reliquary is on like fetching black duty, but then you just die in the air.
3 match wins for Jarvis and you.
The double sweep.
I'm a little bummed. I like Jarvis as a person, but this could possibly be 3 Legacy Premier Leagues in a row that Jarvis U makes the finals of. Jeez. And I don't want Jarvis U to become the Tom Brady of Legacy Premier League, so I'm rooting against him.
Man, you should have just done better, Bryant. Next season,
Yeah.
I'll try to get him if I get him.
I will not be playing humans next league if I'm invited.
I was pretty
But
impressed with your play though, so it was good.
that makes one of us. So you can check out the league information on Wikipedia, and we should thank our sponsors, Wizards of the Coast, Card Hoarder, and Scott Monroe. Have a good night, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you to everyone. Like, follow, subscribe, all that stuff. See you next week.
Hey guys, I don't know if you can hear me right now. Sorry, I'm kind of loud. But Julian makes a good point. We are going to be live